Confession time.
I just need someone to talk to.
Honey, this is a phone sex line. All we do is talk.
For whatever reason, I never played Max Payne 2 before, so for this video I was going in blind and I was pretty excited to do so. Welcome to part 2 of my Max Payne Trilogy 20th Anniversary Retro revisit. If you haven't already, make sure to check out part 1 in the link below.
God, I turned out to be such a damsel in distress.
They were all dead. Love kills. Did I love her? Was there a choice? The past is a gaping hole.
Developed by Remedy Entertainment and written by Sam Lake, it looks like I was not the only one who didn't play the game back when it was released in 2003 for the PlayStation 2. Despite launching to critical acclaim, Max Payne 2 sold poorly, being a disappointing launch for Remedy and Rockstar as the game's publisher. Since though, the game has become somewhat of a cult classic, being praised by many fans as the series' best. But whilst the game is a significant improvement on the first game in terms of production value, I must politely disagree. For me, Max Payne 2 has the best concept with its story on paper, taking many more steps towards the film noir genre with its attempts at a more maturely told crime tale, focusing on a love story with a shady femme fatale. A love story itself is not something we see that often as a core premise in a video game. The closest thing we get to this is optional romances in RPGs, and let's be honest, we only ever do those to see how many chicks or dicks we can get fucked or cucked by.
You've switched tactics.
Despite this refreshing direction though, Max Payne 2 is the weakest entry in the series due to its rushed execution, and for me, it feels like, in a lot of ways, a paid DLC before paid DLC was a thing. Taking place 2 years after the events of the first game, Alfred Woden appears to be a man of his word, and Max is a free man with a clean slate. Having left the DEA, Max has gone back to being a detective within the New York Police Department, taking on as many cases as he does donuts. Adopting the same narrative structure of the first game, we start in the present day with Max and Mona Sachs from the first game, held up in a mansion surrounded by cops, in what seems to be another not so ideal situation for Max, considering, well, he is also a cop. Further to this, the two appear pretty comfortable with each other as they whisper sweet nothings into each other's ear and enjoy the taste of each other's lips. To understand how these two lovebirds came together, we have to take a couple of time jumps. The first taking us back a few hours to a hospital room in which Max is undergoing treatment for some nasty wounds. Max awakes in the hospital to reveal he is now a wanted man for killing a fellow police officer. Of course, he doesn't go into much more detail than that, leaving us in the dark.
Winterson was dead. I was a murderer.
What seems like now a trait of Max Payne, we are taken back again a couple of nights to a regular patrol where Max responds to a warehouse break-in at one of Vlad's places. His Russian frenemy from the first game, which, unknown to Max, will turn from a regular patrol to a series of life-changing events. I think what Max Payne 2 does well is how it feels like a continuation of the first game. This really is part 2 of the story as Max continues to suffer with the grief and guilt of his fallen family, and the attempts Max takes to overcome this and continue with his life. Going back to the NYPD seems like a step back to normality, and I enjoyed the glimpse, albeit a brief one, into Max's regular detective life. Sections around the police station, Max's communication with the chief and other officers on the force. It felt like we were in for a good detective noir story, one that did start out quite slow in comparison to the gut punch of an opening in the first game, but instead of giving us our goal and motivation on a silver platter, it takes its time in building up the mystery around the case. Visually speaking, Max Payne 2 is a tough pill to swallow for me, no pun intended. The graphical fidelity of the game initially seems like quite an impressive improvement upon the first game, considering there was only 2 years between the two titles. Character animations and control aren't so stiff and have a little more natural flow to them, and Max no longer walks in zigzags causing you to fail what would be a simple platforming section, although these sections as a whole are reduced considerably, trimming these annoying and clunky sections. What did become apparent though was throughout the game there are a number of reused assets from the first game, which kind of softens the praise that there was only a 2-year gap between the first two games. You revisit locations from the first game that are generally exactly the same as the first, with a few minor differences of object placement, and everything just feels incredibly familiar, and that's, well, because it is. Everything just looks a bit more crisp and polished, like it's been touched up with a fresh coat of paint, but at the end of the day, it's still the same decaying wall. Now, there is nothing wrong with revisiting locations or reusing assets. I mean, if they're there to save budget, then why wouldn't they be used? But I just got the feeling that it was just quite lazy. Playing this back in the day, it may have had a different effect, perhaps it was nostalgic of the first game, but for me now it kind of just felt like it was all rushed and thrown in to save time and money by reusing levels and assets from the first game. Some will argue that, well, the game is a direct sequel and set in the same town as the first game, so it makes sense that we revisit locations, but the reusing of assets even translates into the new stuff they have created for this game. One level sees Max going to a television studio for a crime drama, pretty much his life from the first game. You could even catch glimpses of this on the TV, which is pretty cool.
Stranded in the dark and violent night, Dick Justice, a lone, hard-boiled fugitive cop, framed for the murder of his wife, on a quest for vengeance through the criminal underworld in the city's heart of darkness.
This level for me was one of the highlights of the game when I first went through it. The level design was pretty sweet with its House of Horrors, maze-like aesthetic with cardboard cut-out characters and backdrops. Things kept popping out, keeping me on my toes as to what was real and what was not, and this also played well into Max's psyche. We see and hear many references to the first game as we venture through, and how could the creators of the show know all of this? It makes you wonder, either Max has a part-time job as a TV producer, or perhaps none of it is real and it is just Max's mind playing tricks on him as he can't escape the horrors of his past.
Flash! Oh, death is coming! It's coming! I think they're here! Get away!
It did kind of feel like fan service, but it was done well and kept me engaged throughout the level. And then we visit it again, and again. I think we visit the level about 3 times, with each time not being very different from the last at all, except the final time when the level is on fire, but by this point I was happy to see the place burn to the ground because I knew I wouldn't have to visit it again. Unless Max is of course a TV producer, then it sucks because he loses not 1 but 2 jobs in this game. One thing that hasn't been reused though is the character models themselves. I'm pretty sure every returning character in this game has been recast or redesigned, and for the most part they look like more believable versions of themselves, with a more realistic representation of the characters they are playing. That being said, this is not necessarily a good thing. Nothing against Timothy Gibbs, who replaced Sam Lake as Max's visual appearance, but I wasn't a fan of Max's design in this game. Whilst the voice of James McCaffrey suits this look better, I would say, the overall look is still pretty bland and unmemorable. Max had a kind of goofy look with his face and jawline in the first game, having a more unique look about him. But here in Max Payne 2, he doesn't look any more memorable than your average Joe. Very generic looking, and I doubt anyone thinks of this interpretation of the character when they think Max Payne. The reason for the change in model for the character was supposedly so Sam Lake could focus more on the writing duties, but unfortunately I found this a little lackluster as well, at least in comparison to the other games. The scene-to-scene dialogue is still top notch and the delivery is fantastic.
I had wanted to be punished for what I had done, but Alfred Woden had kept his word. With his influence, ridiculously, I had emerged from my history of violence unscathed. A hero. I didn't thank him. I couldn't stomach it. I left the DEA.
It has real passion to it, and you can tell McCaffrey loves the character and gives it his all, but it is the overarching plot that I found myself scratching my head over. To explain why, I'll have to give you a quick synopsis of the story, and it won't take too long. 2 years after the first game, Max is called to the warehouse owned by VLADIMIR Lem, who has now become a respected crime boss. The warehouse has been attacked by unknown assassins known only as the Cleaners and have killed a weapons dealer who worked for Vlad. As Max does a little cleaning of his own, he bumps into an old acquaintance, Mona Sachs, who we all believe to have died in the first game because, you know, bodies are always disappearing from elevators.
When the elevator came back down, Mona was gone. There was a lot of blood, but no body.
Back at the station, we meet Detective Winterson. Max is given the case of the warehouse while she is given a different case to investigate the killing of a senator. But, surprise surprise, the suspect in Winterson's case is Mona Sachs, immediately linking the 2 cases together. Max decides to keep the information that he bumped into Mona Sachs close to his chest until he learns more about her motives himself because of their supposed past together. As Max searches for Mona, every time the 2 bump into each other we see Max's playground crush develop, before Max finds himself the target of the Cleaners. After an attack on his apartment, Max goes into classic Payne mode to find out who wants him dead and why, believing it is linked to both cases and Mona. A lot happens as we meet reoccurring characters such as Vinny Gogniti and Vladimir, but discover the supposed lowdown of it all is the survivors from the first game are being hunted by the Inner Circle, the secret organisation who are behind Operation Valhalla that led to Max's family's demise. They sent in the cleaners to erase anyone who was a witness to their operations, and so yeah, Alfred Woden is a man of his word, but he's still got to wipe the shit from his shoes that leads a trail straight to him.
Max, you've got to get me out of here.
You know I can't do that.
Mona is arrested by Winterson, and whilst being interviewed, the station is attacked by the cleaners, who wish to take out Mona, but Max saves her, and the two go searching for answers to take out those responsible for wanting them dead. But first, Max gets some sad titty.
More than anything, I wanted her. Mona is a gaping hole.
In their pursuit, they are apprehended by Detective Winterson, who looks to take Mona back in, but Mona is sure Winterson is there to kill her. In an act of spontaneity, Max shoots dead Detective Winterson, saving Mona from being taken in, or even worse, shot dead herself. But in her dying moments, Winterson is able to pop off a shot at Max, sending him straight to the hospital. Hey, this is where we started.
My wife. My baby. I shot them. I buried them under the rose bush in the backyard.
After escaping his reoccurring nightmare in the hospital, which has been raided by the cleaners, Max pays a visit to Alfred Woden to get some answers. Turns out, Vladimir, who used to work for Woden, is actually behind the cleaners as he hired them to take out both Vinny Gogniti, who is his rival in the criminal underworld, as well as Woden himself, because Vlad, well, wanted to be the big bad boss of it all, taking over the inner circle and all criminal activity and turf. Plot twist. Taking this knowledge, Max's final goal becomes to take out old pal Vlad, and in doing so he discovers Detective Winterson was Vlad's lover, who would do anything, including allowing the cleaners to raid a police station. So, in a matter of seconds, Max goes from cop killer to cop hero.
Winterson.
I'll do it. I'll take care of them both for you.
In another surprise twist, it also turns out that Mona is actually a hired gun working for Woden, who didn't give all of the information as he hired her to take out both Vlad and Max. Plot twist. In this shocking revelation, Max is literally shot in the head by Vlad, and it is up to Mona to rescue him, despite Vlad basically doing her job for her, although a shot to the head for Max is just a scratch.
Death is inevitable.
Max is rescued by Mona, and the two take the fight to Woden's mansion, where Vlad aims to take Woden out. In their final moments, Mona turns on Max, pushing him to the ground to put another bullet in his head, but she admits she has feelings for him, so this prevents her from completing her mission. In what is possibly the worst timing to do this ever, Vlad approaches from behind and puts a bullet in the back of Mona, leaving Max holding dead in his arms another woman he came to love. Then watches Vlad kill Woden.
Demented fool!
Activating rage mode, Max takes out Vlad in a final fight in what is another reused asset as we shoot bolts out of support, like in the end of the first game when we do this on a broadcast tower to take out Vaughn's helicopter. Seeing Vlad's demise, our story ends with Max crawling to the body of Mona and embracing her one last time before the police find him. Close to credits. And that's the bare bones version of the story of Max Payne 2, The Fall of Max Payne. Sounds pretty good, right?
Max. 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 Oh, Max.
As I said, on paper it does. The overall themes of guilt and overcoming tragedy are admirable, and there are some great moments throughout.
NYPD, drop the gun! What are you gonna do about it, pal? We're all guilty of something if you look hard enough.
I don't want to detract from that, but ultimately it comes down to one huge problem for me that pulled me out of the story multiple times, and that is how unbelievable the core love story is.
Bigger here. Oh, can I try it?
I'm a soppy bastard when it comes to romance. I mean, I'd never turn down a viewing of The Notebook, but it is the romance between Max and Mona that lacks any real depth, and I wasn't invested in it due to its seemingly rushed execution. The first time Max sees Mona, there's sparks in the air as if she was his first prom date back when they banged in the high school gym, but her father had to move them away to another country for work, never to see her again, and the only memento Max has of her is being a pair of her panties he has never washed. Let me remind you, the only time Max encountered Mona in the previous game was when she spiked him with Valkyr, sending him on one of those shitty nightmare levels, followed by an encounter in which they briefly worked together in taking down the bad guys.
Tasted sweet as honey going down.
All of this happening, by the way, whilst Max was trying to avenge his dead wife and kid. Whoever said romance was dead? There was the odd flirtatious dialogue, but even that happened at gunpoint. At no point in the first game did I think a romance would be on the cards, so to see it start pretty early in this game was quite a shock to me and felt out of place. But hey, maybe they will develop this further as we progress through the game. A crush that will blossom into a heart-achingly beautiful tale of love. But it never really happens. Of course, I do have to take into account what they were trying to achieve with this and the inspirational material. Mona Sachs is the femme fatale of the story, and like many stories in the film noir genre. A woman who has questionable motives and is more often than not quite black and white with their morality, but our hero is attracted to them, making themselves question their self-beliefs and morals. Love trumps all after all, and Max's dialogue does show this at times and shows homage to its inspirations.
Mona was still the answer. I caught glimpses of her out of the corner of my eye, felt her presence everywhere I went. I was trying to trace her path, recreate the winding course of the magic bullet in her head. I couldn't find her.
But for the whole thing to be believable, there has to be a motive or an event that causes our protagonist to feel the way he does about the femme fatale, and make us as an audience want their romance to succeed despite the odds and the dilemmas that comes with the romance between two lovers being on different sides of the law or morality scale. Max being a cop and Mona a known criminal and assassin, this is the perfect setup for said scenario, but unfortunately lacks the setup in giving this ill-fated romance credibility. I just never felt at any moment that the romance was legit and that there was a reason for them to fall in love and for Max to do the things that he does. He kind of just jumps straight in as if he's had a few drinks and he sees some bird at the bar. And usually when you meet someone at a bar, it comes with some pretty idiotic decisions. Max has many of these and none of them feel justified. One being the big reveal moment to Max's injuries, which is a gunshot wound from a fellow officer after he reacts in the moment and shoots Winterson to save Mona from being taken in. I mean, I've had some crushes in my life, but not one that I would kill a colleague for. Yes, Winterson was all along in cahoots with the enemy, but Max didn't notice at the time, but instead kills an innocent woman to save his loved one, which would be totally understandable had their love been contextualised prior. I think a good comparison to this is the first Max Payne game. Max's wife has not more than 1 minute of screen time, but those well written and presented moments give justification to Max's revenge-fueled slaughter that we could jump on board with, but I really didn't get that here. Speaking of Max's wife, it was the ending that kind of topped it all off for me as the whole plot being unjustified. In true femme fatale fashion, Mona, as I said, is in fact working for Woden and her mission is to kill Max, which she doesn't do because of her literal dying love for him as she is killed off herself in the moment of confession. Once Max avenges her death, the game ends on a surprisingly uplifting note. Although Mona is added to the list of dead lovers, this gives Max reflection upon his wife's death and allows him to accept it. All of his guilt, trauma, and, well, pain is relinquished and he is a free man, finally accepting it.
Now, like all my loves, she is mine forever. She has brought me here to this moment of clarity, where time slows down and I choose to look back to see myself. And in that act of seeing, I am reborn. I had a dream of my wife. She was dead, but it was all right. Mona is a gaping hole.
This had a mixed impact on me, as it was definitely great to see this happen with Max after everything he has gone through, and Max Payne 2 does do a good job of expressing Max's emotions throughout the game. For instance, the nightmare sequences have a really good use of mirrors as Max is forced to look at himself and what he is becoming. It's subtle, but has depth to it. It's great Max can finally look at himself and accept his past, but then on the other hand, the reason for this is Mona, a love interest I was not invested in, so it took away some of that meaning to Max's acceptance. But how, before I forget I'm talking about a video game, let's talk about the actual gameplay. It's alright, it's good. An improvement on the first game thanks to slightly more refined combat and trimmed out platforming, but you are ultimately getting more or less the same gameplay experience here with just some quality of life improvements. Max's jacket is back that can hold as many weapons as needed. Clearly he shops at the same clothing store as a certain merchant we all know.
Got something that might interest you.
Most of the weapons you'll be shooting down goons with you will recognise from the first game: Uzis, shotguns, Max's iconic dual pistols, with a few additions such as a trusty AK-47 which was a personal favourite of mine. The accuracy of the shots is far better than the first game, where it feels less like it is giving you assistance and is more on you to hit the enemies, which I liked. Max's character animations also helped with making the gameplay feel more fluid. The control felt a little more tight and less restrictive. One annoyance I didn't really realise was an annoyance until I played this game was how long Max stayed on the ground after his Neo dives. It was only a couple of seconds, but for those seconds you were a deer in the headlights, unable to get up when you were shot at. Here in Max Payne 2 he pretty much immediately gets up, giving you a fighting chance. Some of the animations are pretty hilarious though. I can't help but laugh and love the ragdoll effects on enemies when you blast them from behind.
Got something that might interest you.
Most of the weapons you'll be shooting down goons with you will recognise from the first game: Uzis, shotguns, Max's iconic dual pistols, with a few additions such as a trusty AK-47 which was a personal favourite of mine. The accuracy of the shots is far better than the first game, where it feels less like it is giving you assistance and is more on you to hit the enemies, which I liked.
Got something that might interest you.
Now you have the ability to use grenades and other throwable weapons without having to equip them as your primary weapon. No longer do you have to put away your gun to throw a grenade, which in many encounters in the first game I just didn't use explosives when I normally would, due to having to switch out weapons. Here, you can just throw and shoot as you please, which again was a lot less restrictive and a welcome addition. With all these improvements though, there was one gameplay mechanic that had been tweaked in quite a peculiar way, and that was the bullet time gameplay, which is essentially the main draw of these games from a combat perspective. Bullet time is there to slow down time as you run, dive and pop painkillers to heal yourself. However here, it turns Max into the fucking Flash from the Justice League. In the first game, bullet time slowed you down, your enemies and everything around you. Everything was going at the same pace, making you feel like you were in the Matrix. Every move and shot counted in the slow heat of combat. In Max Payne 2, however, it is the same concept, but as your enemies are slowed down, Max seems to actually speed up. It's hard to explain, and at first I thought it was just me, but no, it happens. Not so noticeable in a dive, but when activated as you are running and gunning, Max's movement speed is considerably faster than your enemies. Now, imagine what this would look like in real time. Wait, you don't have to. I've done it for you. Whilst I can overlook this as just a gameplay mechanic, even though it completely ignores the rules of physics, it actually makes the game considerably easier. If you are in a bit of a sticky situation with a lot of enemies, just activate bullet time and run around taking them out. It takes away the tension a little bit with everything going slow and the feeling that every bullet counts, when you can just activate Operation Quicksilver like those X-Men movies. Perhaps that is a bit of an exaggeration, but you get my point. Max also has a new reload animation when doing so in bullet time, where he does a little spin and dance to reload instantly, allowing you to pretty much shoot again straight away. To be honest, I did actually quite like this, as silly as it is to look at, but it was also pretty cool and stopped the shooting to coming to a halt when reloading, which was helpful at times. The bullet time gauge this time around also refills automatically over time, whereas in the first game you had to get kills to replenish this, which just adds to the more lenient combat. Whilst everything else in the combat has been improved slightly, this kind of contradicts those improvements because you will just spam this bullet time gimmick so often once you realise it basically makes you a god. Perhaps this is how Lupino felt.
Death is coming!
There are a number of great set pieces throughout the game which give some excitement, but their full potential is somewhat held back by either bugs or poor gameplay design choices that also carry over from the first game. One level sees you trying to save Vinny Gogniti from being taken out by the cleaners, and it's a pretty wacky mission having him dressed as a huge Captain Baseball Bat Boy from the in-game comic, and he has a bomb inside his suit. This is something Max Payne 2 does well. It continues that unique feel within the world itself with its in-game pop culture references and atmosphere, even if the characters are lacking that a little themselves when compared to the first game. But as fun as this level was, I generally thought I had a game-breaking bug that would prevent me from finishing the game. As you escort Vinny out of his home, I went ahead and I couldn't find out how to progress at all. I backtracked and found the reason I couldn't progress was because Vinny was stuck on the door, unable to get out because his costume was too damn big. I reloaded multiple times and he could just not get through. I tried walking into him, shooting him, blowing shit up. I was nearing the end of my patience with it. Luckily, in the end, he just moved and got out, but it took him a bloody long time to do so.
Hey, stop shooting! The bomb's gonna blow! Stop shooting at me!
To mix things up a bit, we take control of Mona in a few sections of the game as well, usually when Max needs saving. She has the same abilities of being able to use bullet time and is a professional acrobatic. A large part of her gameplay segments are sniper-based combat, having to protect Max as he crosses courtyards in construction sites. In the first Max Payne, I complained about poor enemy placement with enemies spawning out of nowhere or from areas you thought to be cleared. This poor gameplay design has migrated over into these sections of the game, making these sniper sections the most frustrating part of the game. Enemies are in positions you can't actually get a shot on them, and enemies coming from all directions, not giving you enough time to locate and eliminate before they reach Max, making for some pretty painful trial and error to get it right. Although admittedly, I would rather this over replaying this. Max Payne 2 is a funny one for me. It really does have its moments. The gameplay for the most part is more refined, excluding the ball ache sections, and the atmosphere and the unique world and style of storytelling all help in making it feel like a decent continuation of the first game. But ultimately, there is just not enough here to give it the feeling that it is a fully realised sequel, and its downfalls with the narrative hold it back from being as good as it could be. Its short length of about 6 hours and lack of meaningful depth to the core premise really does give me the feeling that this is more of an add-on that was perhaps rushed out. But hey, maybe there is hope for a truly remarkable finale to Max's miserable tale. Despite being titled The Fall of Max Payne and having somewhat of a happy ending, let's rewrite that and push Max that little bit further. Yeah?